The thing about being the galaxy's premier psychic warfare specialists is that you get pretty comfortable with winning. Like embarrassingly comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you stop checking if your victims are actually susceptible to having their minds ripped apart before you try to rip their minds apart. That was our first mistake. My name is Vornik Tel, and I am, or rather I was, the third claw of the Kaltharian Dominion's elite mind core. Notice the past tense there? Yeah? We will get to that. It was a Tuesday when everything went sideways. Or at least it would have been a Tuesday if we used Earth's ridiculous calendar system, which we absolutely did not, because we had standards. The Kaltharian Standard Week has 17 days, each named after a different variety of fungus, and we were currently in the middle of Sporethrum when the High Command decided humanity needed to be taught a lesson. The humans had been expanding through the Outer Rim territories for about 6 of their years, maybe 7, and honestly, most species were fine with it. They were loud, sure. Obnoxious? Absolutely. But they paid their docking fees on time, and their ships didn't leak reactor coolant all over the station platforms like the Zorgothians, so small mercies. But then they had to go and claim the Teravan sector. Now the Teravan sector was, technically speaking, unclaimed space, emphasis on technically. The Kaltharian Dominion had been circling those resource-rich systems for the better part of 2 centuries, waiting for the right moment to sweep in and establish what we like to call protective sovereignty. It's like regular sovereignty, but with more guns and less paperwork. The humans saw those same systems and went, "Hey, free real estate," and set up shop before we could blink. The High Command was not amused. "We need to make an example," Prelate Zan had announced during the emergency council session. She was hovering at the head of the chamber, her neural crown pulsing with barely contained fury. These mammals need to understand their place in the galactic hierarchy. I should mention that Prelate Zan had 3 doctorates in applied neurological warfare and had personally overseen the pacification of 47 different species. When she talked about making examples, she meant it. "With respect, Prelate," said Commander Throck, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The humans have proven surprisingly resilient in conventional combat. Their ships are primitive, but their tactics are, well, unpredictable. Which is precisely why we won't be using conventional combat," Zan replied, her eyes glowing with that special kind of enthusiasm that usually preceded someone having a very bad day. "We will use the silence." The chamber went quiet. Not the regular kind of quiet, but the kind of quiet that happens when someone suggests using a weapon so devastating that even the people who built it get a little uncomfortable talking about it. The silence was our masterpiece. 2,000 years of psychic research condensed into a single, horrifying weapon system. It didn't destroy ships or vaporize planets. It did something far worse. It reached into the minds of every sentient being in its area of effect and convinced them that existence itself was meaningless. That every hope, every dream, every connection they'd ever made was nothing but cosmic noise in an uncaring universe. Most species lasted about 4 minutes before the mass suicide started. The Forgotten Collective? 6 minutes, and they were a hive mind. The transcendent ones. They were allegedly beyond physical concerns. Thus 3.5 minutes. The silence had a 100% success rate across 43 different species, spanning every known brain structure and consciousness type in the galaxy. "The humans are new to the galactic stage," I found myself saying, because apparently I had decided to grow a spine at the worst possible moment. "Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic solutions first?" Prelate Zan turned to look at me, and I immediately regretted every decision that had led to this moment. "Third Claw Vornik," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of patience you'd use with a particularly slow child. "The humans established military outposts in the Teravan sector. They ignored our territorial claims. They refused our ultimatum. They even, and I quote, told us to pound sand, which our linguistic analysts assure me is some form of anatomically improbable insult." She leaned forward, her neural crown flaring brighter. We tried diplomacy. They laughed at us. They called our ambassador a glowing disco ball and asked if she could play dance music. So no, third claw, we will not be attempting further diplomatic solutions. We will be teaching them what happens when primitive species forget their place. The vote was unanimous. Well, except for mine, but dissent is technically allowed in the Dominion so long as you are prepared to be wrong in front of everyone, which I was about to be. So wrong. 3 weeks later, I found myself aboard the Claw of Retribution, our flagship mind warfare vessel, hanging in space about 50,000 kilometers from New Providence Station, humanity's main outpost in the Terravan sector. The station was ugly. I mean, genuinely aesthetically offensive. It looked like someone had welded together a dozen different ship hulls, added some cargo containers for flavor, and called it architecture. There were even lights strung between the modules, actual decorative lights, blinking in random patterns that probably spelled out something juvenile in their primitive language. Target is locked, reported sensor adept Krill, her 6 eyes tracking the data streams flowing across her console. I'm reading approximately 47,000 humans on that station, plus another 12,000 assorted species, mostly traders and dock workers. The other species will evacuate once the silence activates, Prelate Xan said calmly, settling into her command throne. We have seen this before. Whatever psychic resistance they have will be overwhelmed, but not before they have a chance to flee. We are not monsters, after all. I wanted to point out that making 60,000 beings contemplate the futility of existence until they wanted to die might, in fact, fall under the category of monstrous behavior, but I'd used up my quota of dissent for the cycle. Charging the silence now, announced Weapons Coordinator Vesh. Estimated time to full power, 3 minutes, 45 seconds. The ship hummed around us as power was diverted from every non-essential system. The lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. You could feel it in your bones, or whatever equivalent your species had. The silence wasn't just a weapon. It was a presence, a wrongness that pressed against the edge of your consciousness, even when it was pointed away from you. I'd been in the room when we'd tested it on volunteers from conquered species. I still had nightmares about the sounds they made. 2 minutes to firing, Vesh intoned. On the main view screen, New Providence Station continued its business, completely unaware that it was about to become another footnote in the Dominion's long history of brutal subjugation. A small transport ship undocked from one of the lower pylons, its engines flaring as it started its departure vector. Some human trader, probably hauling their cargo of whatever useless trinkets they thought were valuable. In 2 minutes, that pilot was going to be screaming into the void, begging for an end that wouldn't come until they made it themselves. I felt sick. Diaz. 1 minute, Vesh announced. All personnel, prepare for psychic backlash, Prelate Zan ordered. Even with our shielding, you may experience some residual effects. Remember your training. I gripped my console harder. The training basically amounted to try not to think about the screaming, but not particularly helpful, but it was what we had. 30 seconds. The hum had become a whine, a high-pitched keen that vibrated through every molecule of the ship. Reality itself seemed to be holding its breath. 10 seconds. I closed my secondary eyelids, the ones that didn't actually block light but made me feel slightly better about what was coming. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The silence fired. I'd expected the usual response. The panicked communications, the evacuation alarms, the desperate, futile attempts at shielding, the slow, dawning horror as species after species realized that their minds were being invaded by an existential dread so profound that breathing seemed pointless. What I got instead was silence. But not the right kind of silence. Sensor Adept Krill, Prelate Zan said slowly. Report. Krill's 6 eyes were darting between her screens, confusion evident in every jerky movement. The silence is active and functioning at full power, Prelate. The psychic field is projecting correctly. Penetration depth is nominal. Energy expenditure is within expected parameters. Then why, San said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Is that station still operating normally? We all stared at the view screen. New Providence station sat there, lights still blinking their stupid patterns, ships still coming and going, completely and utterly unaffected. Maybe the shielding needs time to collapse? Suggested Tactical Officer Gren, though he sounded doubtful even to himself. The shielding collapses instantaneously, I said, because apparently I decided to keep being helpful. We have tested this. Maximum resistance across all known species is 14 seconds. Increase power to 120%, Zan ordered. Prelate, that's beyond safety margins, Vesh protested. Do it. Yes, do it. The whine became a shriek. I could feel blood trickling from my primary ears. The silence wasn't meant to be pushed this hard. We were weaponizing existential dread at levels that could potentially crack open our own psychic shielding. On the view screen, New Providence Station continued about its day with all the concern of a particularly lazy house pet. Still no response, Krill reported, her voice climbing an octave. Prelate, I'm not detecting any psychic resistance at all. It's like the field is just passing through them without any effect whatsoever. That's impossible, Zan snapped. They have brains. We have confirmed they have functional neural structures. The silence works on anything with a consciousness complex enough to contemplate its own existence. Maybe they are too stupid to contemplate existence? Gren suggested. I pulled up the human data files we'd collected. The intelligence assessments put them at above-average problem-solving capability. They have developed faster-than-light travel, complex social structures, abstract art, philosophy. They definitely think about existence. They won't shut up about it. Actually, they have entire academic fields dedicated to asking why they exist. Then why isn't it working? Zan practically screamed, her neural crown blazing so bright I had to look away. That's when the communication came in. Unknown vessel. This is New Providence Station traffic control. The voice was human, male, and sounded almost bored. You have been parked in restricted space for about 5 minutes now, and you are putting out some weird energy readings. Please state your intentions or move to a designated holding orbit. We have got a grain hauler trying to dock, and you are blocking their approach vector. The bridge went completely silent. Not the terrifying psychic weapon kind of silent, just the regular kind where everyone is too shocked to make sounds with their face holes. Prelate Xan stared at the communication console like it had personally insulted her mother. Did they just, she started, her voice trembling slightly. Did they just ask us to move because we are blocking traffic? It appears so, Prelate, Krill confirmed, studying her screens with an expression of pure bewilderment. We are currently hitting them with enough psychic force to make a star feel lonely, San continued, her voice rising. We are showing them the futility of existence itself. We are demonstrating that their every hope is ash and their every dream is meaningless noise in an uncaring cosmos. And they want us to move for a grain hauler. Technically, they said please, I pointed out, because I have a genetic disorder that makes me say stupid things at inappropriate times. Zan turned to look at me, and I was suddenly very aware that she could probably kill me with a thought. What, she said, each word precisely enunciated, is happening. Well, I don't actually know, Prelate, I admitted. This has never happened before. The silence has never failed. Failed implies it's not working, Vesh interjected. All systems show green. The weapon is functioning perfectly. It's the targets that aren't responding correctly. Unknown vessel. This is your second warning. The human voice came again, now sounding slightly annoyed. Either state your intentions or vacate restricted space. We really do have a schedule to keep here, and I have got a captain screaming at me about delivery deadlines. Return communication, San ordered. Prelate, perhaps we should, Commander Throck started. Return. Communication. Krill opened the channel looking like she wanted to be literally anywhere else. This is Prelate Zan of the Kaltharian Dominion Elite Mind Corps, San announced, her voice full of what she probably thought was intimidating authority. "We are currently engaging in a military action against your illegal occupation of Dominion space. You should be experiencing catastrophic psychic trauma." "Why aren't you experiencing catastrophic psychic trauma?" There was a pause. We could hear muffled conversation on the other end, like someone had put their hand over the microphone. Hold on," the human said finally. "I'm going to need to transfer you to my supervisor. This is above my pay grade." Above his pay grade? We were firing the most devastating psychic weapon ever created directly at his brain, and he needed to transfer us to his supervisor? There was a clicking sound. Then a new voice came on. Female, older, with the kind of tired patience that suggested she dealt with nonsense for a living. "This is Station Manager Victoria Reeves. Am I to understand that you are trying to attack us with some kind of psychic weapon?" "We are not trying," Jan said tightly. "We are attacking you. The silence is operating at beyond maximum capacity. You should all be contemplating suicide by now." "Ha," Reeves said thoughtfully. "Is it supposed to make you feel sad and hopeless and like nothing matters?" "Yes, exactly that." "Yeah, we are not really getting that. I mean, Kyle in traffic control says he felt a bit weird about 10 minutes ago, but he thought it was just his lunch burrito. I watched Prelate Zan's neural crown pulse through about 17 different colors, which I was pretty sure meant she was experiencing emotions that didn't have names yet. This is impossible, she said, more to herself than anyone else. The silence has worked on every species we have encountered. Every single one. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Reeves replied, but it's not working on us. So, are you folks planning to do anything else, or can we get back to work? Like I said, we have got ships backing up. Stand by, Zan said, then muted the channel. She turned to face the bridge crew, and I'd never seen her look so lost. Options. Someone give me options. We could try conventional weapons? Gren suggested weakly. Conventional weapons were ruled out because the humans are surprisingly good at blowing things up, Throck reminded him. That's why we brought the silence in the first place. Maybe we miscalibrated for their brain structure? Krill offered. Different neural architectures respond differently to psychic attacks. Perhaps we need to adjust the frequency. We are already broadcasting across the full psychic spectrum, Vesh said. Unless they are using quantum consciousness or something equally ridiculous, they should be getting hit. I was only half listening to the debate, because I'd pulled up more detailed information on human psychology, and what I was reading was, frankly, disturbing. Prelate? I said, raising one manipulator tentacle. I think I might have found something. Everyone turned to look at me. The humans, I continued, scanning through the files. They have this thing they do. It's called existential dread, and apparently they experience it constantly. What do you mean constantly? Zan asked. According to these psychological profiles. The average human experiences existential crisis as a normal part of their development. They think about the meaninglessness of existence starting from adolescence. They have built entire philosophical movements around it. They have art forms dedicated to expressing it. They apparently think about death and futility and cosmic insignificance for fun. The bridge was quiet again. You are telling me, San said slowly, that the humans regularly contemplate the same existential horror that we weaponized? Not just contemplate, I said, reading further. They have turned it into entertainment. Look at this. They have a whole genre of literature called existentialism. They write books about the futility of existence. They make films about cosmic insignificance. They have comedians who joke about wanting to die. That's insane, Gren breathed. They call it mood, I continued. They have phrases like big mood, and that's a mood to describe when they relate to expressions of existential dread. They share it on their social networks. They bond over it. Prelate Jan sat back in her throne, neural crown dimming to almost nothing. They are immune, she whispered. They are immune because they already do this to themselves. Worse than immune, I said, scrolling through more data. According to this, many humans find that confronting existential dread actually makes them feel better. They have therapy techniques based on it. They call it existential acceptance and treat it as a path to mental wellness. Unknown vessel. Victoria Reeves' voice crackled over the comm. I'm going to need you to make a decision here. Move or state your intentions. You have got 3 minutes before I authorize the defense platforms to encourage you. They have defense platforms? Throck yelped, suddenly very interested in his tactical readout. 47 of them, Krill confirmed, her eyes going wide. How did we miss 47 defense platforms? They look like cargo containers. Gren protested, pointing at his screen. They literally look like storage units. Of course they do, I muttered. Why would humans build obvious weapons platforms when they could disguise them as garbage? Prelate, we should withdraw, Commander Throck urged. We can regroup, analyze this, come up with a new strategy. San didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, staring at the view screen where New Providence Station continued its cheerful existence, mocking us with its stupid blinking lights. 2 minutes? Reeves announced helpfully, power down the silence. Zan finally ordered, her voice hollow. Set course for the edge of the system. Prelate, Vesh asked uncertainly. Do it. We are leaving. As the silence powered down and our engines came back online, I couldn't help but access more human data files. The more I read, the more horrified I became. They didn't just experience existential dread. They weaponized it against themselves and each other. They had entire industries built around making themselves feel inadequate. They invented social media specifically to compare themselves unfavorably to others. They created economic systems that guaranteed most of them would feel like failures. And somehow they just kept going. They got up every morning, looked into the abyss of meaningless existence, shrugged and made coffee. Unknown vessel, you are cleared for departure, Reeves said as we began to move. Oh, and hey, if you folks want to talk about that psychic weapon thing, we have got some therapists on station and might help you process whatever you are going through. First session is free. She offered us therapy. The galaxy's most feared psychic warriors, and she offered us therapy. Prelate Zan made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. It was hard to tell. As we jumped to faster-than-light speeds, leaving the Teravan sector behind, I sat at my console and contemplated what we'd learned. The humans weren't immune to existential dread. They were marinated in it. They swam in it daily. They made art about it, joked about it, used it as a bonding mechanism. Our most powerful weapon was their normal Tuesday. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a horrible thought began to form. If the humans could shrug off the silence, what else could they shrug off? What kind of species develops immunity to existential horror by just living with it? And more importantly, what were we going to tell the High Command? I had a feeling that meeting was going to be significantly more painful than anything the silence could dish out. The claw of retribution limped back toward Dominion space, its crew silent and shaken, its legendary weapon completely and utterly useless against a species that apparently woke up every day. He chose to continue existing despite the crushing weight of cosmic meaninglessness, and somehow thought that was normal. Humanity, it turned out, was already living in the horror we tried to inflict. They just called it Monday. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. 6 hours. I have been in combat situations that were less exhausting than watching Prelate Zan try to explain to the High Command that the silence, our infallible, never before defeated psychic superweapon, had been completely ignored by a species that apparently runs on coffee and spite. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, High Admiral Krenth said, his vocal sacs inflating and deflating in what I recognized as barely controlled rage. You fired the silence at maximum capacity, pushed it beyond safety limits, and the humans asked you to move because you were blocking traffic? Yes, High Admiral, Zan replied, her neural crown flickering weakly. She looked like she'd aged about 20 cycles in the past 3 days. And when you identified yourselves as a military threat, they offered you therapy? Also, yes. Krent's vocal sacs inflated to nearly twice their normal size. I was genuinely concerned they might burst. This is unacceptable, declared Counselor Vex from her floating platform. She was old, ancient even by Kaltharian standards, and had overseen the development of the Silence program from its inception. The Silence works. It has always worked. There must be some error in the deployment. With respect, Counselor, I heard myself saying, because apparently I'd completely given up on self-preservation, there was no error. The weapon functioned perfectly. The humans are simply resistant to its effects. Resistant? Vex's eye-stalk swiveled to focus on me with disturbing intensity. Nothing is resistant to the Silence. The Silence attacks the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Any being capable of understanding its own existence can be made to regret that existence. Yes, well, I pulled up my data files, projecting them onto the central display. That's where it gets interesting. The humans do understand their own existence. In fact, they think about it constantly. They just don't seem to care that it's meaningless. I brought up example after example. Human philosophy, human literature, human music that was literally titled things like "Everything is pointless" and "We are all going to die." Their internet was full of what they called memes, which as far as I could tell were just images with text expressing various forms of existential despair, but shared for entertainment purposes. This is absurd. Counselor Drath rumbled from his seat. No species can function while constantly contemplating the futility of existence. The psychological toll alone would be catastrophic. And yet they do function, Zan said quietly. Better than function, actually. Their expansion rate is extraordinary. Their technological development is accelerating. They are thriving while simultaneously convinced that nothing matters. Then we need a new approach, High Admiral Krent stated firmly. If psychic warfare is ineffective, we will use something else. We have other weapons. Actually, I said, and everyone turned to look at me again, I'd like to request permission to return to human space. Not for combat, for research. The chamber went silent. You want to study them? Vex asked, her tone suggesting I'd just proposed eating toxic waste. I want to understand them, I corrected. The silence failed because we didn't understand the target. If we are going to deal with humanity, either as enemies or otherwise, we need to know what makes them tick. What makes a species develop immunity to existential horror? That's not normal. That's not natural. There's something we are missing. Krent's vocal sacs deflated slightly, which I took as a good sign. You really think you can figure out why they are like this? I think I can try. And honestly, High Admiral, what's the alternative? Keep throwing weapons at them until we find one that works? That's expensive, time-consuming, and based on what we have seen, probably futile. The humans are strange. But strange might not mean hostile. It might just mean different. The third claw makes a reasonable point, Counselor Vex admitted grudgingly. Knowledge is power. If we cannot defeat them through conventional means, perhaps we can understand them well enough to negotiate from a position of strength. 3 days later, I was on a small, unmarked diplomatic shuttle heading back to the Teravan sector. Alone. Because apparently when you volunteer for a suicide mission disguised as research, they take you up on it immediately. The official story was that I was a neutral observer sent to study human culture for potential trade relationships. The unofficial story was that the Dominion had absolutely no idea what to do about humanity and was desperately hoping I'd come back with something useful. No pressure or anything. The new Providence station looked exactly the same as it had during our failed attack. Still ugly, still covered in random lights, still operating with the organized chaos of an ant colony that had discovered caffeine. Unidentified shuttle, this is New Providence Traffic Control, a cheerful voice announced over the comm. Please transmit your identification and purpose. This is Vornik Tel of the Kaltharian Dominion, I replied, trying to sound non-threatening. I'm here on a cultural research mission, requesting permission to dock. There was a pause. Then muffled laughter in the background. Oh man, you guys are back? The voice sounded delighted. Hey Janet, it's the psychic attack people. They want to dock. More laughter. I could feel my skin changing colors in embarrassment. Yeah, sure, why not, the human continued. Proceed to docking bay 7. Try not to hit anything with mind bullets on your way in. I was really starting to regret this decision. Docking bay 7 turned out to be exactly as chaotic as I'd expected. There were ships from at least 15 different species crammed into a space designed for maybe 8. Cargo containers were stacked in configurations that violated several laws of physics. A group of humans were playing some kind of game involving throwing a spherical object at each other while shouting. And waiting at the airlock was station manager Victoria Reeves herself. She was shorter than I'd expected. Humans generally were, but seeing one in person really drove home how small they were compared to most spacefaring species. She had gray hair pulled back in a functional style, wore a jacket covered in incomprehensible patches and symbols, and had the kind of face that suggested she'd seen everything the universe had to offer and wasn't impressed. So you are the one who tried to make us all suicidal, she said by way of greeting. Yes, well, to be fair, it wasn't personal, I stammered. It was just military protocol. Aha. She looked me up and down, evaluating. You here to try again? Or is this a social call? Research, I said quickly. I'm trying to understand why the silence didn't work on your species. For academic purposes. Academic purposes, she repeated, clearly not believing me. Right. Well, come on then. I will give you the tour. Fair warning though, it's lunch hour, so things are going to be weird. Weird turned out to be an understatement. The main commercial district of New Providence Station was a sensory assault. Humans mixed with dozens of other species, all shouting and bargaining and conducting business at volumes that seemed medically inadvisable. The food smells alone were overwhelming. Something burning. Something sweet. Something that made my chemical sensors scream in confusion. So what do you want to know? Reeves asked, leading me through the crowd like she owned the place, which technically she did. How do you live like this? I blurted out before I could stop myself. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? The noise. The chaos. The constant awareness that you are floating in a metal can in the vacuum of space, held together by welds and hope. Don't you ever just stop and think about how precarious this all is? All the time, she said cheerfully. Janet in hydroponics has a full panic attack about it every Thursday. We schedule around it. You schedule panic attacks? Well, yeah. Can't have everyone freaking out at once. That'd be inefficient. We passed a group of humans gathered around a viewing port, staring out at the stars. One of them was crying. Is that person okay? I asked. Reeves glanced over. Oh, that's Tim? He does that sometimes. Likes to contemplate the vast emptiness of space and his own insignificance. Says it helps him appreciate his lunch more. That's insane. That's humanity, buddy. She led me to what appeared to be a communal eating area. Dozens of humans sat at tables, consuming food and engaging in loud conversations. The topics ranged from shipping schedules to something called sports to what sounded like an argument about whether existence preceded essence or the other way around. You people really do just talk about existential philosophy casually, don't you? I observed. D. Well, sure, Reeves said, grabbing a tray of something that smelled both delicious and potentially lethal. What else are you going to talk about? The weather? We are in space. There is no weather. Most species talk about practical matters. Work, family, resource allocation. We do that too. We just also talk about the meaning of life and whether we are all just brains in jars and if free will exists. You know, normal stuff. I was beginning to suspect that humans had a very different definition of normal than everyone else. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured as we sat down at an empty table. "Shoot. Your species experiences existential dread on a regular basis, yes? Some of us more than others. But yeah, it's pretty common. And this doesn't interfere with your ability to function, to build societies, to expand into space?" Reeves took a bite of her food, chewed thoughtfully, then shrugged. "Why would it?" "Because it's debilitating. The silence is designed to induce exactly that state of mind, and it's so effective that most species choose death within minutes rather than endure it." "Huh," she said. "It does sound rough. But here's the thing. For us, existential dread isn't a weapon. It's just Tuesday. You learn to live with it. You get up, you brush your teeth, you go to work, you pet your dog if you have one, you watch something stupid on TV, and eventually you go to sleep. Then you do it again the next day. But why? If nothing matters, why do anything at all?" She grinned. "Milmed. Because nothing mattering means everything matters exactly as much as you decide it does. My dog doesn't care about cosmic significance. She cares about dinner time and belly rubs. My job doesn't matter to the universe. But it matters to the people on this station who need things to run smoothly. Life doesn't have inherent meaning, so we make our own. That's the fun part." I stared at her, trying to process this fundamentally alien way of thinking. "You are telling me that your entire species just decided that if the universe doesn't care about you, you will care about each other instead?" "Pretty much, yeah. Also ourselves. Self-care is important. You should try it sometime. You look stressed." "I'm stressed because my entire civilization's military doctrine just got invalidated by your collective refusal to give up." "See, that's your problem right there," she said, pointing her eating utensil at me. "You built a weapon that makes people want to quit. But humans are really, really bad at quitting. It's kind of our thing. We are stubborn, aggressively stubborn, sometimes stupidly stubborn. You hit us with existential dread, and we hit back with spite and coffee. That's not a survival strategy. That's madness. Potato, too." Over the next several weeks, I conducted what I generously called research in what was actually just me following humans around and being continuously horrified by how they chose to live. I watched a human engineer fix a critical life support system while simultaneously complaining that her job was meaningless and she should have been an artist. The life support system worked perfectly. I observed a human family teach their offspring about mortality and the inevitable heat death of the universe. The offspring asked if they could have ice cream afterward. They got ice cream. I attended what humans called a comedy show, where a performer spent an hour talking about depression, anxiety, and the futility of existence, and the audience laughed. They paid money to laugh at descriptions of psychological suffering. "It's cathartic," explained a human named Derek when I asked him about it afterward. "Laughing at the darkness makes it less scary. Plus, the comedian had really good timing." But she was describing symptoms of severe psychological distress. Yeah, and she made it funny. That's skill. I started compiling a report for the high command, though I had no idea how to explain what I was seeing in terms they'd understand. Subject: human psychological resilience, it began. Findings: humans appear to have developed a cultural immune system against existential threats through repeated, voluntary exposure to existential concepts from early development. Where other species protect their youth from contemplating mortality and meaninglessness, humans actively encourage such contemplation through education, media, and social interaction. This has resulted in a species-wide tolerance for existential distress that borders on incomprehensible. Humans do not merely survive existential dread. They weaponize it for entertainment, use it as a bonding mechanism, and have integrated it into their fundamental approach to life. Recommendation: do not attempt to demoralize humans. They are already demoralized and have decided they are fine with it. It was during my 5th week on the station that things got interesting. A Kaltharian ship appeared at the edge of the system. Not a military vessel, thankfully, but a merchant cruiser. They broadcast standard trading credentials and requested permission to dock. I was in the observation lounge when it happened, sharing a table with a human named Felix who'd appointed himself my cultural guide, despite my protests. "Oh good, more of your people," Felix said, watching the ship approach on the view screen. "Maybe they will be less interested in the whole psychic warfare thing." "Kaltharians are generally peaceful," I said, though even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Outside of military operations, we are quite reasonable." The ship docked without incident. I watched on the station monitors as the Kaltharian crew disembarked. There were 5 of them, all wearing standard merchant attire, all moving with the careful precision of people in unfamiliar territory. "I should probably go say hello," I said. "A professional courtesy." "Want company?" Felix asked. "Why would I want company to greet my own people?" "Because you have been living with humans for over a month now, and you might have gotten weird without noticing." He had a point. We found the Kaltharian merchants in one of the trading halls, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The lead merchant, a female named Sethis, brightened visibly when she saw me. "Third Claw Vornik," she said, performing a formal greeting gesture. "We heard you were stationed here. It's good to see a familiar face." "Likewise," I replied. "What brings you to New Providence?" "Trade opportunities. The humans have been expanding aggressively, and where there's expansion, there's profit. We are hoping to establish supply contracts." She glanced around the bustling trading hall, her neural crown flickering with barely concealed anxiety. "Though I admit the atmosphere here is somewhat overwhelming. You get used to it," I said. "Do you?" She looked at me more closely. "Forgive me for saying so, Third Claw, but you seem different, less rigid. Have the humans been treating you well?" "They have been aggressively friendly," I admitted. "It's exhausting, but not unpleasant." Felix, who'd been quiet until now, extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Felix Carter. I run a shipping company out of this station." "You folks looking to move cargo?" Sethis stared at the offered hand like it might bite her. "It's a handshake," I explained. You grasp his hand and move it up and down briefly. "It's a greeting." "How unsanitary," Sethis muttered, but she did it anyway. Over the next hour, I watched Sethis and her crew attempt to negotiate with human traders. It was like watching someone try to have a formal dinner while sitting at a table that was actively on fire. The humans were loud. They interrupted. They made jokes during serious discussions. They used idioms that made no sense. They sealed deals with handshakes and verbal agreements instead of proper contracts. And somehow it worked. "This is chaos," Sethis said to me during a break in negotiations. "How do they conduct business like this?" "They just do," I said. "Trust me, I have been asking the same question for weeks. But there's no structure. No formal protocols. They just talk at each other until someone agrees to something." "I know." "Ill." "And they are successful?" "Wildly successful." Sethis's neural crown pulsed with confusion. "This violates everything we know about efficient commerce. Welcome to humanity." That evening, Sethis and her crew joined Felix and me for what the humans called dinner. It was less a meal and more a social gathering that happened to include food. The conversation ranged from shipping rates to philosophy to something called reality television that I still didn't understand. "So let me get this straight," Sethis said, addressing the table at large. "You people just accept that existence is meaningless and keep going anyway." "Pretty much," confirmed Felix. "I mean, some people find meaning through religion or philosophy or whatever, but yeah, the default human state is basically shrugging at the void and making a sandwich. That's horrifying." "That's life, baby." "But how do you maintain social cohesion? How do you motivate people to contribute to society if nothing matters?" A human woman named Angela, who worked in station administration, laughed. "Oh, we still care about stuff. We care a lot, actually. We just know that the universe doesn't care, so we have to care extra hard to make up for it." "That makes no sense," Sethis protested. "Sure it does," Angela continued. The universe is cold and empty and doesn't give a damn about us. So we give a damn about each other. We build communities. We create art. We explore space. We make things matter through sheer stubborn insistence that they should. I'd heard variations of this explanation dozens of times now, but watching Sethis try to process it was oddly satisfying. Her neural crown was cycling through colors so fast it was practically strobing. "You are all insane," she finally declared. "Probably," Felix agreed cheerfully. "But we are functional insane. There's a difference." It was 3 days later when everything clicked into place for me. I was in the station's recreation area, watching a group of humans play what they called basketball. It was a game that involved throwing a ball through a hoop, which seemed simple enough until you watched them play. They were terrible at it. Genuinely awful. The ball missed the hoop more often than it went in. They crashed into each other. They argued about rules. One person tripped over their own feet and fell dramatically to the floor. And they were having the time of their lives. They were laughing, shouting encouragement, celebrating the rare successful shots like they'd just won a war. They were completely invested in an activity that was objectively pointless, in a game that didn't matter, on a station floating in the void of space where nothing they did would have any cosmic significance whatsoever. And they didn't care. They'd looked at the vast, uncaring universe and said, "Fine, we will care instead." That's when I understood. The silence failed not because humans were immune to existential dread, but because they'd already internalized it and decided to keep going anyway. You can't demoralize someone who's already demoralized and has made peace with it. You can't convince someone that life is meaningless when they have already accepted that and chosen to assign meaning themselves. The silence was designed to break species that needed cosmic justification for their existence. Humans had no such need. They justified themselves. I sent my final report to the High Command that night. Subject: Final analysis of human psychological resilience. After extensive observation and study, I have concluded that humanity represents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of consciousness and motivation. They are not immune to existential dread. They are something far more dangerous. They are adapted to it. Humans have built their entire civilization on the assumption that existence is inherently meaningless, and have responded not with despair but with defiance. They create their own purpose. They assign their own value. They care about things not because the universe demands it, but because they have collectively decided to care. This makes them effectively immune to any weapon designed to strip away meaning or purpose, because they never relied on external meaning in the first place. Further military action against humanity is not recommended, not because we cannot defeat them, though that remains uncertain, but because we fundamentally misunderstand what motivates them. Standard psychological warfare is ineffective. Standard threats are meaningless to beings who have already accepted their own cosmic insignificance. Recommendation: diplomatic engagement, trade relationships, cultural exchange. Humanity is strange, chaotic, and deeply unsettling. They are also innovative, resilient, and surprisingly pleasant once you adjust to their volume levels. We cannot break them. We might as well work with them. Respectfully submitted, 3rd Claw Vornik Tel. The response from High Command came 3 days later. It was brief. Your recommendations are accepted. A diplomatic envoy will be dispatched to formalize relations with human settlements in the Teravan sector. You are hereby reassigned to permanent diplomatic station with humanity. Congratulations on your promotion to 1st Claw. Try not to let them make you too weird. I read the message 3 times, trying to decide if I'd just been honored or punished. "Hey Vornik," Felix called from across the corridor. "We are starting a poker game in the lounge. You want in?" Poker was a human game involving cards, betting, and apparently a lot of lying. I'd been learning it for 2 weeks and was terrible at it. "I will be there in a minute," I called back. I looked out the viewport at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, the Kaltharian Dominion was probably trying to figure out what to do with a species that had accidentally made themselves immune to despair through sheer A bloody-minded stubbornness. And here I was, about to play cards with them. "You coming or not?" Felix shouted. Yeah, I'm coming." I headed toward the lounge, where a group of humans and various aliens were gathering around a table, shuffling cards and talking trash to each other in 5 different languages. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was completely pointless in the grand scheme of the universe. It was also, I had to admit, kind of fun. As I sat down and accepted my cards, I realized something that would have horrified me 2 months ago. The humans hadn't just survived our attempt to break them. No, they'd barely noticed it. And now they were teaching the rest of us their most powerful weapon. Not guns, not ships, not even their terrifying ability to turn anything into either a weapon or a sandwich. Their real weapon was simpler and far more insidious. They taught you how to care about things even when nothing mattered. They taught you how to find joy in the void. They taught you how to look at an uncaring universe and care anyway, just to prove a point. "Vornik, you okay?" Angela asked, dealing the cards. "You look like you are having a revelation." "I think I'm starting to understand humans," I said. The entire table burst out laughing. "Nobody understands humans," Felix said, wiping tears from his eyes. "And we don't even understand ourselves. That's half the fun. Then what's the other half? Figuring out what we are going to do next." I looked at my cards. They were terrible. I had no idea how to play this hand. The odds of winning were statistically insignificant. And I bet anyway. Because if humans had taught me anything, it was that sometimes you play the hand you are dealt not because you will win, but because playing is the point. The universe didn't care if I won this game, so I'd care instead. And somehow, that felt like the most powerful weapon of all. The game continued late into the station's night cycle. I lost consistently, learned nothing useful, and had what humans would call a great time. The Kaltharian Dominion had sent me to understand humanity's weakness. Instead, I'd found their strength. And against all logic, all reason, and all my training, I'd started to think they might be onto something. The void was vast, cold, and uncaring. But here, on this ridiculous station full of ridiculous beings playing ridiculous games, none of that seemed to matter. We cared anyway. And in the end, maybe that was enough.